Hi, and welcome to the Global Impact Virtual Conference hosted by ISTE Community Leaders. My name is Marie, and I'm the Innovation and Development Director at Inclusion Education, and I live in Surrey in the UK. So this session is titled Inclusivity in Education and Beyond, and we're going to focus on the need for inclusivity in education and the workplace and the benefits for all. We'll provide practical ideas and strategies to embed neuro-inclusivity within your setting, and then how to build the skills in your pupils and students to support them going out into the workplace. It will also provide empowerment, ideas and strategies to promote and engage local businesses and the community in order to provide opportunities and progression for pupils and students. I thought I'd start by just giving an overview of Inclusion Education as a charity and the work that we do, and then move on to talking about the inclusivity. So we support young people with SEND needs, but also with mental health needs. So that comorbidity of SEN and a mental health need. And actually it's the mental health need that's the main barrier to their progression previously to mainstream education, and now, as they get older, into moving out into the workplace. We've been doing it for over 10 years, and we now have an independent school. We have a college, and so we're supporting over, in those two provisions, we're supporting over 100 young people aged 11 up to 25. Where we've got to now, I think, in the recent few years, is that the need is much more recognised, and so what we've got is just so many referrals that we're not able to meet the need for everyone. So what we've started looking at then is social impact and how we can provide more opportunities to get into the workplace, particularly, which is obviously what I'm going to focus on today. And one of the things that we have, we're opening in a couple of weeks, is a stepping stone into employment for our young people who are almost there moving into the workplace, and they have developed their strategies to manage their mental health and well-being, and they're well on the way to independent adult life. But what we need is to increase the opportunities that they have. We need to find those workplaces who support this, who support inclusivity and diversity, and want to promote that, so that we're making sure our students are moving into really positive workplace experiences. As well as that, the social impact of removing the stigma, or challenging the stigma that comes around mental health and neurodiversity, and hopefully, increasing that message out there about inclusion, and about the value of people with all sorts of different needs and skills coming into the workplace. So in March, I was just so amazingly lucky to attend the 30-year celebration of the Salamanca Agreement in Paris at the UNESCO HQ, along with professionals from 39 different countries. And this was followed by a 2-day conference that was all about from practitioners to policymakers. And the message there, the very strong message there, very powerful message, was that every learner matters and matters equally. And that is what inclusion is about. It's not just a policy, not just a tick box, but it is a principle. And we need some radical, transformative system change to make that happen, both globally and in the UK. And it was just incredibly interesting to hear, the workshops and the talks, and to hear people from different countries and even areas in the UK, but all over the world, talking about how they are working towards inclusivity. It was absolutely fantastic few days, and just really strengthened that need. The main message, or one of the main messages, was all means all, and the important thing is that these benefits are for everyone. Any accommodations you make, any strategies, they're actually going to benefit everyone, whether that's the whole class, whether that's the whole workplace. So some stats now about, just to back up, why do we need inclusivity? So why do we need to make these changes? Why do we need to be working towards every learner matters, all means all? So in the UK, The research is showing that about 54% of people with a learning disability also have a mental health need. And that's certainly where we come in from inclusion education, in that it's very difficult with both of those things, but actually they're more likely to have both of those things. Actually, children with learning disabilities are 4.5 times more likely to have a mental health need problem than children without a learning disability. Certainly in the UK now, there's been a lot about it on the news recently about this kind of increase, whether it is an increase or whether it's just more recognition and more understanding. But now 1 in 7 people in the UK are thought to be neurodivergent. We also think about the employment rates. Certainly, again, here in the UK, we've got the employment rate for someone with a disability is 49.2%. And that's compared to 80.6% of people who don't have a disability. But actually, when you look at the people that are wanting to work, so over 65% of people with a learning disability, they do want to have a job, but the figures are showing that only about 6% have one. In some of the work that I'm doing with local businesses, and again, that kind of trying to kind of make this movement to build this inclusivity in the workplace. The big question is, or one of the big questions is always, well, why would they? Why would a business do that? And there's a huge amount in this, some of which we'll go on to later. But when I'm trying to kind of think business sense, then 87% of customers would actually rather give their custom to organisations who hire a diverse workforce. So in terms of kind of, I guess, financial, good business sense, actually customers that's what they're appreciating now. And even higher, 92% of people think more highly of a company that hires people with disabilities. And those statistics have come from work done by MenCap to look at the impact of inclusivity and diversity within the workforce. If we go back now and just talk about inclusion education, and our vision as a charity is of a society where disadvantaged young people are supported within the local community and empowered to reach their full potential. What we tend to have is young people who have missed out on a great deal. They have many barriers, perceived and real, and they are not reaching their full potential really in any way. So it is about empowering them to do so, but actually to be out in the local community. We talk a lot about them having independent, sustainable strategies to manage their health and mental health and well-being in the future, so that when they're leaving us, they're able to go on and live those independent adult lives. So our mission then is to provide inclusive education which delivers those qualifications that they need, but also holistically meeting the needs of vulnerable young people, raising their motivation and aspiration, and supporting them into employment, which is the end goal. Our values, we value and engage vulnerable and young people in the community. We promote inclusion in education. Our values are around reducing the stigma around mental health, and we are very open and transparent and strength-based. The big one as well is we're not operating in isolation. We're wanting to work in partnerships with all sectors in society, and it's that I really feel that we need to do together to make these changes. So I want you to think about yourself now. Maybe at school, if that's not going to trigger anything, or you at work. I want you to put yourself in the shoes of our students. You felt isolated, you felt low, you felt anxious, you've perhaps felt like the only one who feels like this. And then you come into one of our education provisions. So whether it's the school, whether it's the college, but you come into this environment that is inclusive, that it talks openly about mental health, that develops people's motivation and aspiration, that is student led, that is empowering. And then I want us to imagine creating all of those feelings, that safety in a workplace that they can then move on to. And that's my big thing. I want our students to be able to move on to a workplace that cares, that appreciates and understands their needs, and that they can flourish and thrive. So the Inclusion Way, that is the term that we use to describe how we're working together with our learners and students across the charity. And actually, it's also how we work together with each other as colleagues within the staff team, and how we work with and engage the parent carer community, the families, and our local communities as a whole. So the Inclusion Way is a culture, and it's a way of life for us, which has evolved through over a decade of experience supporting the mental health and education of young people. And the Inclusion Way continues to evolve. So we're encompassing what we learn and what we have learned, via all of our collective experiences. And the evidence-based programs, and the research, and the student voice and the parent voice, parent carer voice, and listening to each individual of what they need and how they need us to support them. So we have developed a very strong and supportive culture and set values at Inclusion. And through working with every single one, like I said, the learners, the students, the staff, the volunteers, the parents and carers, who have all individually contributed to shape our very best practice. We truly believe that no significant learning occurs without a significant relationship. So we go by the 6 principles of trauma-informed practice. So we are promoting, valuing, and focusing on safety. Number 1, absolute safety. Trust. So often when we have young people coming to one of our provisions, they have had very negative experiences, whether that's through education, whether that's through care, whether that's just generally throughout. They've had some very, very negative experiences, and typically trust is very, very low, and feelings of safety are very, very low. So we need to work on those first, and that is done through being transparent, being honest, being authentic, and as having that kind of the safety to do that within the staff team as well. So we're collaborating. Then we're giving choice. So giving choice to young people who perhaps haven't felt that they've got choice for a very long time, if ever. And then we're empowering them, and we're also considering our culture. So what does that actually look like? So practically, physically, what does that look like? So we work with the students, first of all, to identify what helps them feel safe. So students knowing that they can speak to a member of staff if they don't feel safe, and using that language and developing that shared language. So do you feel safe? What can we do to make you feel safe? Showing that they are heard. So they're not just listened to, they are heard, and that we are taking action. It's very important to keep communicating. So if someone has said something, and you have agreed, this is how we're going to proceed, this is how we're going to make you feel safe, then they need to know that action's being taken, and when, and details as much as you can, because otherwise that trust is then not going to be there. So it's going to be, we hear very much frequently that people are being told, oh yes, I'll do this, and then it doesn't happen. And then every time that happens, that trust in other people is eroded. So it's through developing that feeling of belonging. So we put thought into everything, from what room they sit in, where in the room. I mean, for example, somebody with hypervigilance, perhaps related to trauma, they don't sit them with their back to the door. for example. They will need to know, they'll need to see the door to be able to see who's coming in and out. So we think about their sensory needs, and this there's many levels to this. So sensory in smells, lights, sounds, different, and that can change at different times of day. Thinking about who the needs of the other students as well in that, but also sensory in spells of very hot weather, spells of cold weather. Quite often we have students that have difficulty regulating their body temperatures. So thinking about eating, sensory needs through that. To try to consider all of it on right from when they come in the door to minimise them. So we're talking about minimising them so that they're able to come in and attend. Obviously, what comes further on down the line is those sensory difficulties aren't going to go away. So further on, it will be about kind of working with them to work out strategies that they can then use themselves. But yeah, in that initial trauma-informed, we are thinking about how to make our students feel safe, and that is a big part of it. Making sure they know who is their person to talk to, having that safe person to talk to, a key member of staff, and how they can communicate. Sorry, skipped. Excuse me. Right, there we go. So how we can communicate with them. If their feelings are escalating, it might be that their more typically used method of communication isn't going to be the right one in that time. It might be, if things have escalated to a certain point, might need to have other ways of them letting someone know how they're feeling. And we've done this in various ways. It could be through, on an app, letting someone know I need to talk to their safe person. You can get wristbands that are don't talk to me, I need to talk. You can use emoji cards, are quite useful. Even students just sending an email and saying I'm not feeling great right now. I need to talk to someone, and finding those safe spaces that they can go to de-escalate, to start to feel more secure, giving you then the opportunity to be able to sort of then go back and talk through everything. But having a safe space to go to, especially if they're feeling, if they've got that fight or flight or freeze, and that adrenaline is coursing. But so knowing they've got a safe space, knowing how to communicate with someone who is a safe person to them, and then thinking about all those other ways, how they can feel that they belong, they are listened to, they are heard, and they are feeling safe. And this does include, obviously, robust policies, practices, and safeguarding in place that are very regularly reviewed. I mean, all of this is extremely planned and done on an individual basis. So quite often we would do an individual safety plan with a young person, and that's agreed. And then it will be reviewed. It'll be reviewed regularly, because what works sometimes doesn't then always work. So it is an individual process. So the next one we've got is trust. So we've developed their feelings of safety in that they can then be coming in, and then we need to talk about trust. We need to promote trust, and we need to prioritise trust. So it's absolutely essential that these relationships are based on trust and mutual respect. And a very big one, I've mentioned it earlier, is never promise anything you can't deliver. So, that does happen. And, sometimes people do it out of the absolute best intentions, the goodness of their heart. And they say, yeah, I'll sort that for you. And then it ends that, they go away, and then it turns out they can't sort that. And they've overpromised, again, just through wanting to be kind and supportive. So one thing that we always try and do is just put in that extra step. So if a student says something like, I really need this to help me, or I'd like to do this, or I'd like to have time with this person because I feel safe talking to them, then we'd always put in that little extra step of just saying, I understand that, and I agree that would help you. I can't I can't promise to arrange that now because I'll need to go and find out, but I will find out and I'll get back to you. And if we can't make that happen, we will find another solution. So rather than just saying, yes, yes, of course, we'll do that, and then finding out you can't, so putting in that extra step. We also explain all decisions and reasons and act transparently at all times. I think young people, I think particularly the ones we've had, are very attuned to perhaps knowing when someone's not being completely honest, or if they don't understand a decision that will cause great distress. And it might be that they don't agree with the decision. But then again, that's something to explain. Say, I know that you're not necessarily going to agree with this, but this is the decision I've made, and this is why, and we can talk about it. But yeah, just explaining everything. Next one we've got then is choice. So our students are supported in making choices. Like I said earlier, they very often haven't felt that they've had a choice in anything for a long time. It could be that they haven't had a choice in treatment. They haven't had a choice in how they're feeling. They haven't had any kind of control. So we ensure that they have a voice and they are heard. This could be through anything, so through that key staff relationship, it's through student voice panel meetings, through student newsletters, student-led events, campaigns, just down to like kind of the day-to-day feedback on sessions and curriculum. Every year we invite them to feedback on what they've learned, what was useful, what wasn't, what else do they need to learn. And then things like surveys and worry boxes, boxes they can put a post-it note in. So we're building the trust, the belonging, the choice, and staff are prioritising listening to their needs and wishes. So the next thing we've got, next stage, collaboration. So the value of staff and service users' experience is recognised in overcoming these challenges and improving all our systems all the time. So we're not staying still. We're continuing to ask for views and ideas and to keep responding and building. So it could be using formal and informal peer support, self-help. The organisation ask service users and staff what they need, and then collaborating on how those needs can be best met. So we're not doing top down, we're not doing something to someone or saying we know best and this is what you need. We are beside them and we are asking for their views. So supporting them to make the decisions, and encouraging them to plan things themselves. So again, when things have been out of their control, they perhaps find it more difficult. So we're seeking feedback, we're collaborating. And then lastly, in those trauma-informed approaches, we are putting effort into our cultural consideration. So we're sensitively acknowledging, yet gently challenging those cultural stereotypes and biases based on gender, sexual orientation, age, religion, disability, geography, geographical area, race or ethnicity. And this can include specific teaching, but this also includes celebrating and educating through awareness days and campaigns through the year. So what does it look like then at Inclusion Education? So we value our staff, we work hard on our staff welfare, and we support and clearly, explicitly role model this to a student. Everyone has an individual starting point and different experiences, so we then work with them on an individual plan for progression. Thinking about preparing for work, particularly that's, if that's the aim, they're now gaining their qualifications and they're doing their English and maths and employability skills. We're looking at workplace behaviours, and we're also doing a whole raft of therapeutic and creative sessions. So music, art therapy, drama, gym, counselling, beauty, nails, makeup, cooking, any of these things that are going to spark that interest, that aspiration, and just that interest in doing something else and developing those skills that could lead them out into the wider world. We also look at things like peer leader roles, student voice panel, looking at using assistive tech and focusing on using that assistive tech to get out into the community. And then the big one, work experience. And that is where then our work with local businesses comes in. So we do meet with local businesses, part of networking, and then getting all of these messages out about the importance and value of an inclusive, diverse workforce, about talking about our students and they're just the amazing skills and qualities they can bring to a workplace, and then working with them to show them an inclusive workplace that says inclusivity is not as daunting as you think it is. It's not as expensive as you think it is. And it's not as hard to do. And actually, the benefits for the business are huge. So creating accommodations for a truly inclusive work environment, whether we're talking about education in your classrooms, in your schools, in your colleges, or whether we're talking about in work, involves various strategies and initiatives to ensure that everyone, regardless of their background, abilities, identity, that everyone feels valued and respected and that they can contribute effectively to the best of their abilities, whatever those are. So some key components then, and some things that are, again, relatively straightforward, is just ensuring that all workspaces and digital platforms are accessible. So that could be the physical, so ramps, elevators, accessible toilets, but also things like your workstation. So thinking about the chair choices, thinking about screen readers, thinking about compatibility software. Flexible work arrangements can help. So again, whether there's flexibility to start later, to finish earlier, accommodating diverse needs such as family needs, caring needs, but also some disabilities and health needs are going to impact sleep. So looking at any flexibility within that. Providing comprehensive training within the workplace to all employees on diversity, equity, inclusion topics to raise the awareness in the company as a whole. And then again, that cultural competence. So fostering a culture of competence where employees are encouraged to learn about and respect different backgrounds, traditions, perspectives, and needs. Mental health support, so having that, implementing programs and resources within the organisation for mental health support programs, counselling services, and then day-to-day destigmatising discussions around mental health. I think the stigma still exists, and that can mean that people are very, very fearful of talking about mental health. So representation. So again, striving for that diverse representation at levels of the organisation, including leadership, to ensure that different voices are heard. Collaborating again, so going back to that, the trauma-informed, the inclusion way. So collaboration, hearing people's needs and voices and listening and taking action. I mean, I covered some of this at the beginning, but again, yeah, there are many benefits. And this is what I'm communicating to local businesses, and this is what you can do as well. It doesn't actually cost as much. Like I said, it's not as daunting, it's not as expensive, it's not as time consuming, and it's going to benefit everyone. And actually, as well as increasing the staff morale, people are more likely to stay in the roles. So you're saving on the recruitment and downtime costs, less likely to take time off sick, less likely to be late, for example. So yeah, in a nutshell, inclusivity isn't as daunting, it isn't stressful, and it isn't as expensive. And that is it. So I've thoroughly enjoyed talking about inclusivity in education and beyond. And I hope it's given you some ideas of sort of how to promote it yourselves within your organisation and how to think about supporting businesses to get these opportunities for progression for our students. Thanks again for watching this session as part of the Global Impact Virtual Conference hosted by ISTE Community Leaders. Please watch the other sessions, including those that are live and those that are pre-recorded, and you can join in the conversation throughout the conference on ISTE Connect and on social media using ISTE Global sorry, hashtag ISTE Global and hashtag ISTE Community. But thank you so much for watching.